Today, we're continuing my conversation with Wes Woodhouse about attention, focus, and how we can apply fighter pilot techniques to our spiritual disciplines. If you missed part one, I encourage you to go back and listen as we explored the growing attention gap in our society and how it's affecting our spiritual lives. Let me reintroduce Wes. He's a husband, father, marathon runner, and fighter pilot. His mission is to build up the next generation of leaders armed to take on the dynamic challenges of the attention age. In 2020, he founded Vector Atlas, a leadership development and attention cultivation agency, where he leads a mastermind of committed men grounded in wise counsel and accountability, striving to live a life of purpose. As an attention performance coach, he helps leaders maximize their potential by focusing on what is most important. In our first episode, Wes shared how his experience as a fighter pilot taught him the critical importance of focused attention and how those same principles can help us in our spiritual walk. We discussed how the distractions of modern life are creating an attention gap that affects our ability to connect deeply with God and others. In the second part of our conversation, we'll be exploring practical ways to help our congregations develop better focused habits, how to create environments that foster deep spiritual connection, and how to build communities that value presence. Let's jump back into our conversation with Wes Woodhouse. Right, exactly. And so thinking about from a spiritual disciplines and just our spiritual life perspective, then, sometimes that might look like, do you have a routine of when you do your quiet time, or how you set up so that when you start, you can start instead of sitting down and getting ready to get ready.
Yeah.
Do you have it may not always work out to be a consistent time of day. Some people's life and number of kids they have is not
Right.
conducive to that.
Right.
But do you have something that can anchor you back into that? Today I did my Bible study sitting at jury duty,
Yeah. Right.
which, by the way, was very distracting. Talk about
Yeah.
attention, because they've got the TVs on, and
Yeah.
how loud can I make my headphones where I'll still hear if they call my name?
Right.
But so
Yep.
that I'm not hearing the whatever home remodeling show that's playing on the
Yep.
TVs. But I was like, okay, we're just going to pick up and take this routine that I normally do sitting at my desk, and I'm just going to do it sitting in a room full of 200 people
hmm
instead. But I still have the routine as a touch point. Or if you have, sometimes that looks like having, what's the backup plan version of this?
I think that it is very important. It's not only the small picture routine, your Bible study, quiet time, what your morning routine specifically is. There, in many ways, there's the larger routine that if you adhere to that, that will
Mhm.
enable successful micro routines. For example, when we are getting ready for a mission to fly, there's distinct phases. There's always a mission planning. Then there's the briefing phase where you brief everybody what you're going to go do. Then there's the execution phase, and then there's the debrief phase where you go back and you figure out what went well, why, and how can we do this better. Same thing is you get your big picture routine as far as I'm going to make sure that I'm winding down and going to bed at a certain time to then enable me to get a good amount of sleep consistently, to then enable me to wake up at the time that I need to, that then enables doing quiet time or, whatever else it is. And so you put those macro routines together. Yeah. And then to your point of having a routine or a checklist that you follow that just becomes, it is an enabler for, you're not thinking about the process
Mhm.
because you've already vetted that process and it works. You're just executing the process. And so any of that time that would have been spent on, okay, now what do I do? Or whatever else, it allows you to execute your routine more succinctly, still getting out the same quality, if not more quality. And then it opens up the aperture for actually being able to be creative because you're not cognitively weighed down on the logistics minutia of how to get this done. And so your mind, since it's not weighed down by the human logistics, is able to go and have that unconscious thought in the margins.
Mhm.
And that, I believe you're right, is it will, because I agree with it and have experientially seen that as well. That, yeah, you will end up being more creative, so to speak, when you do adhere to a routine that is enabling. Going back to the shame thing, going into it, giving yourself the grace to, okay, this is not working. So stop it.
Right.
You know, what was good about it, take the good parts, prune out the bad parts, or
Right.
put something else in, and then try it again and give yourself the grace to change it when you need it to change. And that's kind of a double-edged sword because when you meet adversity and you're like, this is getting old, that, you kind of have a friend of mine put it really well. He was actually asking for accountability in a certain area of his life. And I can't even remember the specifics, but what he was like is he said, this is my quit criteria. I think it was actually, he said, make sure that you ask me what my quit criteria is after I've done the planning for whatever this thing is that he was going to do. Make sure you ask me for what my quit criteria is so that I either have it or I need to make it such that then when I get to that place, if I've met the should I quit now criteria and try something different, I've enabled myself to do it so I can actually continue progressing instead of just staying in the churn of something that's not working. So I think that is definitely true that creativity will be spawned out of, or more creativity will be spawned out of good, positive, useful routines.
And if you think about it, like those routines and those checklists that you have as a pilot, those are not the first draft of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Some really smart people took a long time working on making different iterations and trying to make a system that's going to run smoothly so that you're not bogged down in the process, but you're covering all the things that you need to cover. And the same way, the routines that we create for ourselves, sometimes you got to test it and refine it and adjust it. Okay, well, that didn't work. And, not just, okay, I hit resistance, but where's the breakdown? Is the breakdown the
Right.
routine or is the breakdown something else? And then I'm, thinking too that those routines actually help us back to the social media and our devices and all that, that by having the next thing decided already, it keeps us from gravitating to the phone for the next thing or to
Yes.
wherever for the next thing. I have
Right.
a couple for some church things and then for some business things, I have a couple of workflows. So on Fridays, I do a certain checklist, and on Saturdays, I have a certain checklist. And sometimes I get interrupted in it, but I can always touch base back on it. And I don't have to worry whether those things are going to get done. They're going to get done. And I'm also not necessarily going to look at this, even to the point of my email puts notifications and newsletters kind of in their own bucket.
Mm.
And I have a
Hmm.
day that I know that I'm going to go through them. So I don't need to go through them the rest of the week.
Yeah.
I
Right.
go through the regular ones, but I don't go through unless I'm like looking for something specific. I
Right.
don't have to deal with the gajillion emails that come in. I know that they will get done this week.
Right.
They will get done on such and such morning, right? And so it can kind of protect you from some of the, oh, I need to check whatever, because you've already had if it is something you need to check, you can design when you're going to check it.
Exactly. And so you're describing two things is you're mentally offloading the inline viewing of the newsletters or whatever else it is, load of constantly has of information that you don't need at that time. And you're offloading the logistics of when you're going to get to it.
Let's pivot a little bit here and, thinking about, I love this conversation about focus and even some of these strategies because for us in the ministry space, in some ways, sometimes our lives can be even less structured than if you're going to a job. And we
Hmm.
have to put some of these things into place depending on what your ministry environment looks like. You may not have something where your workday always starts at the same time, or you may not have some, we may not even be going to the same place every day, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think some of these tools, they've been helpful for my ministry. I know they'll be helpful for others. But now, how can we help our congregations develop deeper spiritual focus in this world of distractions? What practical advice could we offer them?
Well, the first I think would be lead by example in that place where it sounds like you already are in many ways. If the people you're trying to influence or give them the tools to develop a deeper spiritual focus, and you're not also pretty good on those types of tactics, then they're going to see right through do as I say, not as I do type of idea. So I would say, hey, you need to practice it yourself so that you can experientially say, yeah, this is what helps me. So just being that, and then for anybody who's actually on your team, making, I guess, more strict rules around things like that. For example, I run the soundboard at church, and so, hey,
And you're
leave
everybody's
yourself.
hero, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. It's a lot of fun. But, hey, let's leave the cell phone outside of hand's reach unless there's an actual operational need to having that, and make sure that you're doing that for your team as well, that they need to have a certain environment, I guess. Secondly, I mean, I think a lot of it is just the things that we've talked about, specifically Cage 2, their spiritual journey, their walk, and, emphasizing it's important to continue reminding everybody. I need to remind myself this as well. But, what are my big picture priorities in life? It's faith, family, fitness, and then function, or sometimes they say flying, which is my job, and then fun. And so making sure that I have that top priority dialed in. And when I continually go back to that's my top priority, then that will filter down into should I be prioritizing this or that? And so, just kind of lacing every conversation with that. And I think the best business leaders are the ones who have that vision of where they want to go. And then everything just points back to that vision. When somebody's briefing them on, hey, I think we should change this, they're like, how does that support our vision? And if there's not a great answer, then maybe we either need to refine that effort, go with something else. Continually recaging, that conversation to how does that help us with, or how does that help you with your walk, or, how does that help you with your outreach, or whatever it is. I think those are the big things. And again, it goes back to if you're not doing it yourself and people are seeing that your attentional life is in shambles, then they're going to see right through anything that you say. So I think, at least in my personal experience, most pastors are very good at being able to focus on. There's one from the pastor of our church when I was in high school, and I just had a recent conversation with him too. But man, he is so single target focused on whoever's in front of him. Like another person will walk by, he won't even look 100%, which does a couple things for him. He is keeping himself on whoever he's conversing with.
Right.
He's telling them that you are important to me in general and specifically in this moment. And then he's telling everybody else by not even looking and opening up that avenue for distraction that, hey, I am right here right now. If you need to talk to me, likely we'll be done in a couple minutes,
Mm.
whatever it is, but not right now because I'm talking to this person. And I think that's a really good way. It's a very intense type of conversation, but you never have a question on whether he's paying attention to you. And that's what it comes down to. It's paying attention. I'm spending my attention to you right now, Joy, just like you are to me, just like the audience is to us, and we are to the audience. It's a transaction. I'm giving my attention to this conversation. You're giving your attention to this conversation, and so is the audience. And so just the physical posture of that too, I think is a very big deal.
And use the word giving. Our attention is a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift
Yes.
that we can give to our family. It's
Right.
a gift that we give as part of the work we do for God. It's
Yep.
a gift to that person that you're talking to and focused in that conversation.
Here,
And
you're right. And I think so. You cage the question, pastors, ministry leaders, everybody who has a family, and really everybody, we're all ministry leaders,
mhm,
even if it's the ministry of my family and my
right.
children, for me, my wife, and then my children. And so with the kids, am I spending my attention on them or am I distracting myself? And I'm not the greatest at this. This is something that I need to improve on. But yeah, I mean, again, there's many distractions. I come home from work, I'm tired, I just want to sit on the couch and, whatever. But they are watching. We all know kids are amazing at taking in information and turning around and having that exact same behavior. And so making sure that you're thinking about, hey, what lessons am I teaching my kids or my spouse or my friends or whoever it is that you're with, my small group, whatever, um, the congregants of my church, by just the way that I am presenting my attention to them or to the people
Yeah.
around them. Big deal.
Yeah. And can I say, like, might ruffle some feathers here, pastors, you don't have to be on call all the time. You don't have to read every text message the moment it comes in. Especially if you have a team. So I've seen some teams do this well where they have a rotation of who's on call and make some fancy technology to make that logistically happen. When you're in a meeting, it's okay to have your phone off and be fully present in the meeting. When you're with your
Yeah.
kids, it's okay to be, when you're doing your sermon prep, it's
Yeah.
okay to be, I'm turning off everything from the outside. My spouse knows if the house is on fire to come knock on the door. Right?
Yeah.
But they
Right.
know what I'm working on. And then there will be times where you can come back and check in. You don't have to be available to everybody all the time because
Right.
you are not available to anybody completely at that time.
Hmm. Yeah. That's very true.
And you're not going to be putting out your best work. You're not going to be having your best quality time with God, which is the foundation of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Your family is going to get shortchanged. All of these things. Chris Songson, who's a coach for pastors, he always has this, like, if you have to choose, don't cheat your family, cheat the church. That is the first ministry that God gave you.
Yes.
And you're not going to be able to serve the church well if things are falling apart at home anyways.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. And so I just want to, before we close out, I wanted to ask, how can believers create communities that will foster better attention and focus on what truly matters?
My answer to that, I think if you there's a lot of different places where this message will come from too, but it is, you have to be willing to cut people out who are not benefiting you or themselves or behavior, and be tactful about it, obviously. And if it's family, that adds an additional depth of complication. And if you see them as a ministry, then that also is a different level of complexity. But in many scenarios, a choice to be hanging out with those types of people. And if you need to slowly reset who you're spending time with, who your community that you are being influenced by, because in a lot of ways you can go into a community or relationship and say, I'm gonna be a great positive influence on them just by spending time with them, when I think the reality is, in more cases than not, especially if it's a group, you are going to assimilate to the group much more than that group is going to assimilate to any individual, yourself included. So a lot of that, I think, is a choice where you have to first off know what your values are, and what you want in the people that you're spending significant time with. And then once you know that, you can start to evaluate which groups of people or which individuals are in line with those values. But at the end of the day, when you look at Christ's ministry on earth, though, everybody was calling him out and being like, why are you hanging out with the tax collectors and the dregs of society, essentially, and going over to their houses for dinner and, all of that. And even the disciples themselves sometimes were kind of surprised at the choices that Jesus made. And, all of those people were people who, if you ask Jesus what he values, they don't value that. So he is spending time with them. And there is definitely a time to do that as far as outreach. But then there's countless times in the Gospels where Jesus took his disciples to a secluded place,
Right.
or he took himself to a secluded place and recharged by spending time with the disciples who did value what he valued and wanted to value what he valued. And so it is kind of I wouldn't even call it a balance thing, because it's probably going to be different for everybody and different for the specific scenario. But a way to think about it would be, what groups of people are you filling up your cup and renewing? And so those are the ones that you need to pay specific attention to, so that when you go to your workplace and maybe there's some people who don't have those reserves and can put energy and attention into them and hope to influence them, by your walk and then by what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I would think about surrounding yourselves with the intentional people.
Yeah. For those of us that are in vocational ministry, the distinction gets really fuzzy, but there's a difference, like with a doctor, between their patients that they're serving
Right.
and their friends that they're hanging out with. But, and, for those of us who work in the church, the lines are a lot more blurred, but still
They are.
who we're hanging out with when we're replenishing
Right.
versus I'm meeting with this person because I'm investing in them. That's a totally different, you're wearing a different hat and you're approaching it with a different goal and a different aim in mind. And the time, you're not spending all your time on one or the other either.
It is, and I think that brings up a point too, kind of like the example I gave in the Gospels of, yeah, Christ took time away from his to go just be with his disciples and to recharge. And a lot of times that happened to be just in a boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee,
Right.
because that's the only way they could actually build some space. It's okay, and it is a must to take that time to recharge your batteries and to spend time with people who fill you up and who are supportive and who you don't need to have your game face on for all the time. And so, which I've seen that plenty of times before in all different types of ministries, pastors included, is that they will get burned out because they're just 100% ministry mode. And that's not sustainable for any human, to include Jesus Christ, who is also 100% God.
Right.
And so that is a necessity that needs to happen. What you said, if you have to choose between the church and your family, choose your family. And I think that kind of, which is why I have faith, family, fitness being, mental, physical, spiritual, although a lot of that is covered in the faith section, but my own personal fitness where and ability to then attack the day, if you will. And so that I think is also important. And if you continually sacrifice your own ability to recharge your batteries by spending time with the people that recharge your batteries, or by yourself, if that's what it looks like, then you got to do it. And you're not going to be bringing your best to your ministry if you're not doing that.
Yeah. Jesus was God, but part of his mission was to teach us how to live.
Right.
Part
Yes.
of how he taught us how to live and how to minister was out with the crowds, and some of it was home alone or with your buddies or going off by myself.
Yep.
Yeah. So something else too, I think, with fostering those communities is I think being open about the fact that you are intentionally trying to work on this area too.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whether that looks like I used to lead a girls' club and it was middle school girls, and we would collect the cell phones on the way in. It's not that they couldn't see them, they're sitting right there. That is for us as a group, and us leaders would put ours in there too,
Mm-hmm.
because we're saying you guys and Jesus are more important than the phone and the
Yeah.
social media and whatever else could come up. Or, maybe it's like, hey, I'm getting sitting down for dinner with somebody and hey, I'm going to put this on Do Not Disturb or whatever that looks like. But being a little bit open in your process sometimes will encourage somebody else, and you're not telling them what to do unless it's in your
Mm-hmm.
house, and then you tell them whatever because it's your house.
Yeah. Right.
But you don't have to tell them what to do, but just being open about, hey, I'm trying to make this more of a priority. Can you help me with that?
Right.
Hey, can you ask me this question? Can you please let me know?
Mm.
Right. And that, iron sharpens iron, but it also makes it kind of a safe place for people to work through that process of trying to get better at
Right.
focus and attention and being with the people that you're with.
Make sure that you reiterate that reason, because that's what will eventually sink in and hopefully translate to, maybe those ladies in other portions of their lives were like, hey, let's all just throw our cell phones aside because we want to make sure that we're spending more of our attention on each other instead of on being distracted or whatever else it is.
Well, as we wrap up now, where can our listeners connect with you online and learn more about your work and addressing the attention gap and all the stuff that you're doing?
Big one would be the website, weswoodhouse.com is the best. I'm semi-active on LinkedIn as well, but the website's probably the best.
Awesome. And I'll drop that in the show notes for our listeners as well. So thank you so much for your time in this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I love to nerd out on this stuff, as you could probably tell.
Yeah, it's a great subject. Thank you for having me, Joy. It was a pleasure.